They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but nobody ever tells you what it's like when karma shows up wearing a blizzard. That's what happened here 1 minute. I'm standing behind a line of windbreak trees I'd spent 20 years nursing along the edge of my property, and the next, I'm watching the HOA chainsaw M down in the name of restoring the view. The only thing they restored was a front row seat to the nastiest snowstorm Montana had seen in decades. Here's how that little act of arrogance buried their million-dollar homes under 20 feet of wind-driven consequence, and how I, a former federal terrain analyst who warned them every step of the way, ended up the only guy on the ridge still above water, or snow in this case. You want to know what real cold is? Step outside at 6 a.m. on a Montana morning in late autumn just as the sun's barely thinking about rising. Air so sharp, it feels like broken glass against your teeth. I was still in my boots, half-laced, clutching a mug of coffee like it was a lifeline, when I heard it, the high whine of a chainsaw. That's not a winter sound. Not out here. Walked out onto the porch, saw the slope behind my house was nothing but stumps and scattered branches. My windbreak gone. 30 years of spruce wiped out in a few hours because some HOA president with a plastic smile thought they looked messy. You ever have your heart sink so hard you can hear it land? That was me. The man in the yellow parka, clipboard in hand, barely met my eyes. HOA work order, he said, flashing a slip with a signature that sure as hell wasn't mine. K. Holloway, president. Valley Ridge. They said the trees were ruining the mountain views. I told them this is my land, those trees are on my deed. The guy just shrugged. Ma'am said it was disputed. Get it done before the first snow. He wouldn't even look me in the eye as I snapped a photo for evidence. That night the wind came howling down the open ridge. You know, most folks think windbreaks are just landscaping something pretty for the neighbors. Out here, they're the only thing between you and a winter that'll freeze you from the inside out. That wall of green, it breaks the current, slows the snow, keeps your house from turning into an icebox. But with nothing to stop it, the wind rolled in hard, loud, whistling through the seams of my home, waking my daughter Grace. She's 16, has asthma, and that night she asked me why the wind sounded different. I told her the truth, because someone took the trees. The next morning I marched straight into the HOA office. Karen Holloway, in her signature crimson coat, gave me a smile that could have sliced bread. "Oh, Mr. Dunham, I thought you'd be on vacation." She actually said that after destroying my windbreak. When I confronted her, showed her my deed, my survey, the clear property lines, she waved it off. "The board agrees we have the right to manage the community's aesthetics," she said, pointing to some clause about visual harmony. Like stripping away our only shield from the weather was some kind of community service. I left before I said something I'd regret, but not before I made my point. Visual harmony doesn't keep your pipes from freezing or your kid from coughing all night. But it does make the HOA feel important. A few days later, the storm came early. Grace's cough kept me up. Dad, stubborn as ever in the back cabin, wouldn't leave, though I could see his hands shaking when I brought him firewood. The temperature inside my house dropped 6 degrees in 2 days, even with the heat running nonstop. I filed a trespass complaint with the sheriff, but the deputy just shrugged. Tough case unless you've got proof. Lucky for me, I've always got proof. Survey maps, drone footage, time-stamped photos from Grace's science fair project last year, everything mapped, labeled, and filed away. I called it Wind Wall Evidence Phase 1. You'd think that'd be enough. That Saturday, a notice showed up in my mailbox. Violation, non-compliant structure, exterior tree line, $200 fine. For trees they cut. The nerve. That night the temperature dropped to single digits. The wind howled, rattling the house, shaking the windows. I sat up with a fire poker, not for burglars, but in case the furnace died. My mind spun with images, Karen's smug grin, the forged signature, those stumps lined up like gravestones. They hadn't just cut down trees, they'd severed the only protection my family had from what was coming. Monday, winter slammed into the valley 2 weeks ahead of schedule. The wind didn't sneak in, it charged. I walked the northern line boots, crunching on snow. The stumps already wore white caps. Grace watched from the window, pale, inhaler close. It wasn't about comfort anymore. It was about safety. First call I made was to Dr. Lanning Grace's pulmonologist. She told me if the storm gets worse, get her out of there. Trouble was, the HOA controlled the only road out. If I tried to leave, I had a feeling they'd block me just for spite. So I doubled down 2 more filters, extra humidifiers, the whole works. Next, I pulled out my old field kit from my FEMA days topographic overlays wind modeling software, a battered Nikon DSLR with a thermal scope. If they wanted a fight over evidence, I'd give them one they'd never forget. Installed 2 motion-activated thermal cameras, one watching the wind sweep over the empty ridge, one recording how much more heat we were losing from the exposed side of the house. By Wednesday, snow was piling in wild, hard drifts, nothing like the even manageable layers we used to see. Dad's porch was buried before noon. The HVAC system in my place groaned under a load it wasn't built for. Night after night, I analyzed thermal images. Heat loss up 18%, snow accumulation up 40% compared to the year before. All that snow, all that wind funneled right toward the new Phase 3 luxury homes at the bottom of the hill, the same homes the HOA insisted would increase property values. They'd redirected the storm, and it was about to collect. Thursday, I drove into town and sat down with Earl Kensington, a land surveyor with more years on the job than most folks have spent in Montana. He measured my plat, stamped it. That windbreak's been a buffer since '87, no question. Notarized copy went straight into my evidence folder. Friday. Karen made her next move, a certified letter warning me about obstructing communal snowflow. According to her, my remaining landscaping was hazardous. She'd invented a new phrase, thermal harmonization. I nearly laughed. They were getting ready to blame me for the mess they'd made. Saturday, I was woken by the sound of something giving way. The old storage shed had collapsed under the weight of a snowdrift. 2 hours of shoveling later, hands raw and bleeding, I knew one thing: help wasn't coming from the HOA. If we were going to get out of this, it'd be with science and law, not community visual harmony. That week, I filed a FOIA request for every HOA board email about landscaping and contractors. Called the landscaping company, turns out they didn't exist in any state database. The crew that cut my trees, unlicensed, uninsured, probably hired through a cousin or a friend. Tuesday, the snow returned with a vengeance. Generator sputtered, intake vents clogged. Grace coughed through breakfast, Dad radioed for more firewood, and I trudged through knee-deep drifts to his cabin, goggles icing over. We weren't living, we were surviving. All because someone wanted a better view. That night, a whistleblower from the HOA board sent me an email. Karen forged the vote, hired her cousin, no board approval. Be careful, they're hiding more than you think. I printed it, added it to the file. The next day, another violation from the HOA, this time for improper snow management. They blamed me for the snow piling up against their homes. What they didn't know was that I'd already mapped the snow drifts, every pile, every direction. With the windbreak gone, physics took over, funneling snow straight into those Phase 3 homes. I overlaid the current subdivision map with the old buffer zone. Turns out the new homes weren't just in the wrong place, they were in a spot county zoning had specifically marked as hazardous. Brought all this to Deputy Hollowell. He flipped through the files. You want civil court or criminal trespass? I told him both, but he warned me Karen's married to a state rep. This might get ugly. Didn't matter to me. Juan doesn't care about politics. The next storm hit harder. Our house groaned. Dad's cabin was half buried, and still the HOA sent threats, litigation for defamation, for obstruction, for violating HOA privacy codes by using drone footage. I laughed out loud. They called evidence a violation. Then it happened. One by one, the Phase 3 homes began to buckle. Roofs collapsed under the weight of wind-packed snow. Emergency services tried to reach the subdivision, couldn't get through. The main road was gone, buried not by spite, but by the laws of topography. Karen texted frantic, people are trapped. Some homes are unlivable. We need to talk. No apology, just panic. I didn't reply. My daughter asked, are you going to tell them I said I already did? They just didn't listen. That night, I bundled every document, every thermal image, every map, every whistleblower email, and sent it to the county, the state environmental board, and law enforcement. Labeled it Valley Ridge Pattern of Negligence. By morning, helicopters circled, rescue sleds dropped, and the HOA lights below flickered out. Karen called, her voice stripped of its silk. Please, half of Phase 3 is buried. I didn't know the trees were that important. I said, you were told, you just didn't care. She hung up. That's when it hit me. People rarely want truth. They want comfort, even if it's dangerous. The lawsuits came, of course. HOA sued me for malicious interference. In court, Karen tried to argue I'd weaponized nature. My attorney presented the maps, the emails, the evidence of forged votes, illegal contractors, environmental buffer violations. County engineers confirmed it, 6 homes red-tagged for demolition, all in the hazard zone, all because the windbreak was removed. The judge dismissed the HOA's case, referred Karen and her board to the county attorney for possible fraud and negligence charges. Get back to those saplings he told me on the way out. Spring came late that year. When the snow finally melted, I planted new trees, one for every year the old one stood. Grace helped me, her cheeks pink in the morning sun. Neighbors showed up, real neighbors, not HOA volunteers. We mounted a plaque in honor of natural boundaries and those who protect them. Karen disappeared. HOA disbanded Valley Ridge, became Valley Commons. People learned. A year later, we held a quiet gathering. No press, just cider and a fire. I kept my speech short. Winter will come again. This time we'll be ready. When reporters finally asked what the story was about, I told them it's not about revenge. It's about respect for the land, for the truth, for each other. You can't negotiate with physics. Do I forgive her? I'm not sure forgiveness is what matters. But every time I walk the ridge saplings, pushing up through last year's scars, I remember I didn't seek revenge. I let nature do the talking. And when it did, it told the truth loud enough that even the wind had to stop and listen. So let me ask you this. Where do you draw the line between control and respect? Have you ever seen justice served by something bigger than yourself, something you couldn't argue with, only prepare for? Drop your thoughts below. Share your story. Because winter will always come, but karma remembers.